All right, let's go. A first OP09 Eggman tournament. Let's see what happened. Where's oh, purple Luffy, let's go. Let's go. What the fuck? What? 11 purple Luffy. None of you guys can top. Every other deck fucking topped. Oh, we gotta talk about this shit. Welcome back. My name is Godin from GreatLakes-TCG. I need to get this video out, so I rushed home from work to try to get this out for you guys because I am just disappointed with the performance of Purple Luffy, especially in that very first Eggman tournament from yesterday. That said, let's get right into this video. I will say a lot of this video does kind of go over some of the same concepts we did from 8.5, but I think in OP09 Purple Luffy is so strong. I actually changed my mind completely. Initially I had Purple Luffy down as like a tier, like a 1.5 deck, maybe even tier 2, but after all this testing that I've been doing, this is by far one of, like, this is definitely a tier 1 deck. It's not even close. It does take a little bit more skill this time around, but and a little bit more luck, I will be honest. But this deck definitely can compete against any deck at the top levels. So happy to announce that we are back. That said, let's get into the deck list. So this is the current deck list right now. As you can see, I'm not going to explain every single card, but this deck list is very similar to the deck list that we had seen played by the winning deck list over in Japan. I think it was like the 3rd or the 4th CS. The only changes we made is -1 2k here, added a 3rd Sanji, because Sanji is actually a really good card. There are other tech choices you could do. So other cards that I've tested are the 4-cost Usopp. Once this wants to load. So the 4-cost Usopp can be played, this vanilla can be played over Bon Clay as a 2-of. We're only playing 2 Bon Clay instead of 3 or 4 because really Bon Clay is an extra 4-drop as a supplement to the deck. It's not really the main card you're looking for to play out. It helps makes some of your 7 Dawn curves a little bit more consistent because you can play Bon Clay with another 4-drop if you don't see your Sanji or your Luffy Taros. That said, other cards to consider, and I've seen decks run this, but unfortunately I just don't see the need to continue playing it, is Magellan. So Magellan is a brick that just doesn't fit with the deck anymore. You could try to play it as a 2-of or 3-of. It helps, especially if you have like a Lucci heavy or BY heavy meta, but I think we do well enough into those decks without it at the moment. Lucci not as well as as BY we do great without it, but it's not like the decks are, neither of those matchups are unwinnable without Magellan, and it's just not worth playing that brick once again. So those are the main tech slots that I will kind of feature here. There's other, so some people are off the 9 Mom and just playing for the 9-cost Luffy. I don't think that's appropriate. I think 9 Mom is 100% necessary against Blue Doflamingo. Sanji helps in that matchup as well. So the addition of Sanji really allows you to be aggressive into Blue Doflamingo, especially if they try to do that, that thing where they stop swinging characters sideways to try to kind of like do like a set up a turn where they could just go like swing wide with like 4 or 5 characters because you're unable to remove them if they don't turn sideways. That said, let's get back into the deck. So I will say I did want to have initially a slide that kind of goes over all the matchups, but I'll just kind of discuss them as we kind of go through it. I will say Blue Doffy is still one of the harder decks for us to go up against, but with that list, one thing I will say that I didn't mention is this 2-cost Robin. You could take the 2-cost Robin out if you don't like it. I personally love it. I think it's really good against Shanks. It's really good against Blackbeard. It's really good against it's good against anything, honestly. Good into the mirror. The main reason why is it's very cheap and it's searchable, and at worst it's a 1k counter in your hand. But the biggest thing is that This Robin can be played out with almost any other card. So you could do Luffy, Taro into Zoro, and then play out the Robin on top of, like, because Zoro can search Robin, then play out the Robin. Then you just establish two bodies with the blocker. Or you could even, if you really have to block her up, you could always just do Onami with the Robin that's only 6, or you could double Onami into Robin, or whatever you need to do. Like, her being 2 cost allows her to be comboed with a lot of different cards, and the way you manipulate your Dawn is up to you. But it's just a phenomenal card. This could also be Usopp. This could be extra copies of Bon Clay. This could be a 3rd copy of Mom. It really is up to you to kind of play around with these ratios to see how you like it. Gum Gum Giant is probably the most broken card in the game. I thought it was Moria, but after playing with this card, it's this card, without a doubt. It's insane. And this is the reason why Purple Luffy is even considered a tier 1 deck. Without this, if you don't see this, it's kind of cooked. All right, moving forward. So, Blue Doflamingo. I will say the matchup is a little dice roll dependent. Going first is a lot better than going second. The main reason is if they do play White Tiger, or like Gravity Blade, they are unable to Gravity Blade you on curve if they're going second, which means that you can kind of get an extra turn of swinging with your 5-cost or 4-cost bodies. That said, this is Blue Doflamingo is you play it very similar to to 8.5. You don't really want to swing into them. If you can avoid it, you want to swing into their bodies, drain their hand, and you win late by dropping Linlins. That's basically the game plan. Luffy Taro helps with the Sanji, and if it sticks, you get a lot of draw power back, and you need those. The biggest thing that I see people that they don't do is they're unable to play around pudding. If you're going first, it's a little bit easier since you're not doing that extra draw to play around pudding, because you typically don't get into the position where you have 8+ cards in hand. But at the same time, you want to go first, take a life, drop a 4-cost. It could be Kamazo, it could be a Zoro, it could be whatever, right? Most of the time, it's going to get lawed. It's unfortunate, but if it sticks, it's great. If you play Kamazo, that's even an anti-pudding tech because it's not going to replace itself. It's not like Zoro where it replaces itself in hand. You could also play Bon Clay here. If you play Bon Clay, it means you could and you have a 9-mom in hand. So that it means when you can go to 8 the next turn and then go to 9 after you Luffy Taro the next turn after that. So Bon Clay is actually not a bad play on 4 Dawn. The issue is it doesn't do anything into Doffy. So I'd actually rather that get bounced into my hand so I can use that as counter. You want to go for board, drain their hand, and then you could start attacking their life once you've kind of stabilized. The first few turns kind of dictate the whole game. Once again, if you're going first, you don't swing into Doffy that first turn. You do like a little mini starve, because if you have nothing to swing at, you don't swing at his life. At least, so you always want to be swinging at characters. You don't want to give him those extra cards in hand, those extra counters. You want to drain his hand of counters as soon as possible, so then you can start winning on board, and then you'll start winning the game from then on. And that kind of is it for that going first turn for Doffy. I really don't have much more to add based off that last video. First is preferred, but if you have to go second, the biggest thing is 5-cost Kid into Luffy Taro into 9-mom. That kind of combo or that curve will win you the game a majority of the time, as long as if you see a Sanji or a Zoro to play off the Luffy Taro. 5-cost Kid kind of does the same thing that Bon Clay would do going first. It allows you not to be as aggressive taking your life, so then you can actually get to 9-mom fairly healthy. And from then on, as long as you have a couple Gum Gum Giants or even a second 9-mom, you can kind of take over the game from there. Going second, it's much more important to kind of, if Doffy's only swinging 7k at you, or even sometimes if they're swinging 8k at you, if they find a boa, it sometimes is worth it to give the 2 cards, because you'll go from 6 cards in hand down to 4 cards in hand, but you're going to be drawing off life and drawing for turn, right? So you do replenish your hand, and you play around pudding by countering out that first attack on 3 Dawn from Doffy's side. Sometimes you don't have the counter in hand to give, and at that point you kind of just have to play around, hope they don't have the pudding, or hopefully they have a Jimbei that they really want to get out of their hand, so they play that instead. I personally have gotten really punished by pudding going second into Doffy. It's easier to starve them going second though, because you're able to kind of just swing into whatever they play off leader ability. So it's once again though, you win board and you push for game afterwards. Lucci. The Lucci matchup is actually a little bit more tough in 09 compared to 08 or 8.5. The main reason that for this is because we are no longer playing Magellan, as you saw in the deck profile. That said, this matchup also heavily relies on us going first rather than second because of two things. One, it takes them off that 9 Dawn turn where they could play 1 Dawn, like an Ice Age plus Moria or Tempest Kick Moria. Them being unable to do that is actually very tempo heavy for you, like in your preference. The second reason is if you're able to get a Luffy Taro out on curve, so say like you go Zoro into Luffy into Sanji, it's really hard for Luffy to keep up with that aggressiveness because on their 6 Dawn turn, they need very specific combo pieces. Like they have to have maybe like a Brook already established or a Kuzan already established, or just like double Ice Age Lucci. There's different combo pieces to do it, but it's really, really hard to remove two bodies on that turn specifically. At most, they usually just remove the Sanji and they kind of, then the Zoro and the Luffy kind of stick. That's what I've seen is the most common thing that they do on that 6 Dawn turn. That said, and honestly, Jack doesn't scare us nearly as much as it did like before. Swing with your blockers. Always swing with your blockers. If you're going second, you have that kid out, swing with your blockers. It's very important to continue swinging those 6s into Lucci because once again, he only has a certain amount of 2Ks that he plays, so you actually get a lot of value. And the one thing I will say is Sanji. Sanji is such a good card into Lucci right now because it allows us to be very aggressive, especially with the 9-cost Lucci or Luffy that we have like available to us. Because you can play Sanji, like Resta Rebecca or Resta Sabo, swing 7, and if you've been pinging them the like 6s the whole game, typically they just don't have the 2K to counter out of that, and so they're taking that 7. Usually by the time you're like they'll be at 1 or like maybe 1 or 2 life max, and then you could follow it up with say another Sanji or a 9-cost Luffy if it's already on board. Continue to rush. If you have Uso Hachi, I would try to save him in hand. And so you could continue to rush, play the Uso Hachi, rest their blockers. You can kind of ignore them if you see enough pieces and keep swinging into face. Typically they buckle. I've ended Lucci's before they even hit 10 Dawn. And it's just the ability of this deck to continue to put out 2 bodies a turn plus swinging really aggressively. Because even like I said, everything in this deck swings 6 or higher. So it's really nice. I will say, one alternative to playing Luffy Taro on 7, once again, is playing Bon Clay, because if they don't remove the Bon Clay, their Moria turns are wasted on removing Bon Clay and not wasted on removing like a Sanji, for instance. Or if you could try to get a Bon Clay out before their Moria turn, like it helps a lot. Next, BY Luffy. We are so in against BY Luffy, so I think going first is preferred. Once again, you can do like that whole Wombo combo against BY. You can go really wide, really fast, and play like big rush bodies, so it makes it really hard for them to kind of like continue to play their game and keep a large hand. I do think that you can, once again, if you see the Zoro into Luffy Taro into Sanji going first, you really can push their face in, and they have absolutely no way to play around it. No matter what they do, they're going to be losing at least 5 to 6 cards in hand that turn. That's it. It's just they can't play around it. If you swing correctly, and by that I mean like say swing 6 or swing like they'll be down to 2 life by the turn after you play Luffy Taro typically, and you're able to just swing really big into them. You take that whole turn just to swing big into them. They'll probably be able to live. You're not going to kill them there unless they're absolutely bricked, but that sets up the turn after, where once again they'll probably activate, go to 9, like 9k 9k, it'll be 9k 0 life if they want to do that, or 7k 1 life, and it just allows you to continue to push their face in regardless of their self-activation or leader ability, that is. And it's just really because they only have limited options to play. And their Morias will end up being bricks because they're unable to Moria by that turn. And now that they play other bricks such as Kuzan and Raigo, you're actually even in a better position. That said, you also have the big moms to rely on. So say you don't see your Luffy Taros on curve, say you're not going first, so it's a little bit easier for BY to catch up or deal with your board. You still are able to have the 7-cost Sanjis and the Usops to kind of rest the Sabos and go for game. So BY is still fairly Purple Luffy favored. And just to kind of go back through everything, so for Doffy, I would say it's probably 45-55. Doffy is favored in this matchup. It might be closer to 50-50 if you're going first, but Doffy is definitely favored going second. Against Lucci, I would say Lucci's also favored, probably 45-55, maybe even 40-60. It really depends on if you're going first or second, but it also depends on how much, like what he sees. Like Lucci's high roll will beat your high roll. And this is the only deck's high roll that I think beats us. Otherwise, our high roll will beat most decks, especially if we're going first. But we can go second and still hit like really good curves. Now, going on to Bonney. Now, this would probably be the hardest matchup for Purple Luffy, right? So why play Purple Luffy? We've already, I just mentioned, you know, where you have a slightly losing matchup into Doffy, slightly losing matchup into, or even, a slightly losing matchup into Lucci, and BY Luffy were winning. Like I would say this is at least maybe like 65-35 in my testing. It's really Purple Luffy favored. Bonney is going to be the hardest deck for us. The reason being is we removed Magellan's and we removed Kaido. Kaido was like an equalizer in this matchup because it was able to KO, say, like a Cavendish while establishing a 10k body that doesn't get affected by her leader ability and is able to swing into, say, like a carrot, right? So even if he had multiple bodies established or multiple 5-costs established, we were able to kind of clear 2 bodies in one turn with this and establish a really strong body without losing much tempo. Unfortunately, that we're no longer playing those cards based off the nature of the deck to kind of be as consistent as it is and to draw as much as it does. So we kind of lose out a little bit against Bonney. The main reason is Carrot is really annoying given our Luffy Taro 7 cost and Sanji's a 5 cost. So Carrot's able to lock out a lot of like swings from those cards. On top of that, like a double Doffy turn can really be aggressive and annoying for, say, our big moms or our 9-cost Luffy. And finally, while Sanji is great in terms of, say, like resting a what's his name, a Hawkins, and then being able to like swing like into it Hawkins like with your other characters, or even rest other blockers, it's just not enough because we're still losing so much tempo into Bonney. The effect that she has 9-cost Shanks now is really strong because it could clear our, like, any of our 9 costs. So it's just really like tempo heavy in Bonney's favor. The way to win is to just kind of is to put out so many bodies so fast. She really just doesn't have the ability to safely play the Doffys or safely play the Shanks by the time she hits to 9 or 10 Dawn. And so like double Luffy Taro like in a row is absolutely insanely powerful against Bonney. I feel like that's like one of our only winning like play lines. Or like Luffy Taro into 9-cost Luffy, and then being able to clear everything she puts on board, plus drawing a couple times off like the Sanji. So there are like, we could still win, but this is probably like a 70-30 Bonney favored for the most part. I would say going first is better. One silver lining is that Bonney has no hand control, so you could just draw to your heart's content. Search your heart's content. Now, the mirror. I think this is going to be a very common matchup in this meta. I do think that going first is preferred. The main reason is that in my testing, whoever hits the Luffy Taro first, and more importantly, whoever hits the 9-cost on board first is very favored. Sometimes I'll even do like a third ramp. So if I'm going first and I hit Luffy Taro and then I go to 8 the next turn, I'll ramp again just to get the 9-cost on board. The main reason is and if that 9-cost is a 9-mom, it's fine. Like that's probably the better one to play out in the mirror, especially if you're ramping for that turn to get it. The main reason is the purple Luffy mirror is because we have Gum Gum Giant and because we play so much counter power and we don't have a lot of like straight up KO or removal. A lot of our, like the way we remove bodies is by just swinging into them or just ignoring them and swinging into face. So because we don't play any of those removal spells, we really just need to establish a board, and then we're able to defend attacks into our board. So that being said, like say if I have a 9-cost Luffy out on curve going first, even if I took the extra ramp for it, that 9-cost Luffy cannot be contested. Even if he swings 15 into it, right? Like puts 10 on lead or swings 15, he is unable to kill me because I have Gum Gum Giant likely on board or like active, so I could defend my characters much more easy as the purple Luffy that's playing, like, that's already played the characters first. Say my Luffy Taro's my Sanji swing, even if he has a Luffy Taro and Sanji on his side of the field, typically he's not going to want to don up everything and swing big. Even if he does, once again, I have the ability to play blockers first because I've already established my board. So I'm going to be the first one to play blockers. I'm going to be the first one to swing. I'm going to be the first one to aggressive, like aggro his face. So even if he responds to my Luffy Taro with his Luffy Taro, I could just choose to swing it to his face and just really aggro him down to the point where it just becomes very, very hard for the player who's, you know, responding to these attacks to actually take the initiative and win. Typically, the only way that, like, you know, the term two-player wins is if they get the 9 cost out first prior to the whoever went first does. And so you could play Bon Clay to turbo ramp, take your leader ability twice, and you could probably get there first. If you do, you actually have a chance at winning. Sometimes it does become a kind of, because we have such big bodies and attacking into them doesn't really get us anywhere. It gets a couple cards out of hand. Sometimes it does become a game where we're just like rushing to attack face into each other. We're both ignoring each other's board. That does sometimes happen. You have to get a feel for the game, see what your opponent's playing, see what you're playing and what you're seeing, and kind of go from there. Once again, Gum Gum Giant is insane. One small tidbit that I think a lot of people don't actually take advantage of, especially in Purple Luffy, and this is just a general kind of tip. 9 cost Luffy and Sanji can minus more than 1 Dawn. So that can be played in combination to get out, you know, your 6 cost Sanji blocker can be cheated out. So if you're on 10 Dawn and you play the 7 cost Sanji, you can minus 2 Dawn as long as it's like, if your opponent's at 10 as well, and then get that Sanji out for 3, for that extra 3. So it's getting a lot of value that way. Also, you can also like plan ahead. So say you want to Dawn minus 4 one turn, so that the next turn, if you have like 3 of those Sanjis in hand, the next turn you could actually, once you go up to 8 Dawn, your opponent will hopefully be at 10. You're able to put out 2 of those blocker bodies. And that, or if you say like you could minus 3 and have a Gum Gum Giant out, and then it still equals out to, you know, being 2 under your opponent. That's a small tidbit. Not a lot of people use it. It's very niche, but sometimes it comes up. Blackbeard. So against Blackbeard, I think that we are very, with the list that I am playing, it doesn't matter if I go first or second. Second is preferred, but I think the Blackbeard matchup's actually not bad whatsoever. I think we're actually favored going first and second. I would say this is probably a 60-40 Purple Luffy favored. The reason being is with the list that we're playing now, we have enough 4 drops and enough 5 drops to, after turn 3, just completely spam 2 4 drops or 2 5 drops every single turn for the rest of the game, and Blackbeard cannot handle that. Luffy Taro on curve on that 3rd turn is not wrong, but I do prefer, you know, putting out 2 bodies. So if I'm going first, it's like, and I'm on 7 and I have, you know, I wasn't able to like get a Bon Clay early, or I wasn't able to ramp earlier, and then 7's my highest curve, then sure. And I have a Luffy Taro in hand or a Sanji, sure, put it out. But then after that, I don't want to be playing any more 7 costs. It's just 5 costs and 4 costs and making my board as wide as possible. Typically, Blackbeard cannot handle that type of aggression. By the time they get out their 10 cost Blackbeard, you have 3 or 4 bodies that could swing still after they nullify one. And they're only able to KO like 1 body a turn at most. So this is actually really, really beneficial for us to just go wide and just swing. 5 cost Sanji is really strong because he still draws a card. And that's kind of about it. One thing to say, actually 2 things to say, tidbits of information. You really want to watch what Dawn the Blackbeard is going to, and watch their trash. The reason being is if they're going to 10 Dawn, the Dock Q or their searcher body, the Luffy, can just be ignored and you can just swing face. Why? Because if they're going to play a 10 cost, they are unable to use that extra Dawn to get like another cost minus body or a cost minus spell or search with Lafitte. If they're not gonna Blackbeard, then you've already, you know, you've kind of already won. If they're forced to not Blackbeard, then typically there's one in their hand that's bricked, and you've kind of are in a position where, okay, I forced you to not be able to Blackbeard on 10. You have to do some sort of removal just to stay alive. I'm happy with that because then I'm able to win and keep up the pressure. Because once again, they could typically only remove 1 or 2 bodies a turn, and by then, hopefully, you'll have more than that. Now, one thing I will say that people do wrong is they save Gum Gum Giant for this like perfect, oh, they're swinging 7 or swinging 8, I'm going to get a lot of counter value out of it. No, against Blackbeard, you need to keep your hand healthy to continue to play out those characters. So use your Gum Gum Giant to filter your hand and keep drawing cards. Don't save it for some random, like, you know, 6k or 7k swing into your face, you're getting value out of it, or an 8k or 9k swing to get value. That doesn't matter. You're not defending out of those. You want to make sure you, even if there are a 5k swing into face, you want to use the Gum Gum Giant to filter your hand. Finally, Shanks. Once again, we are fairly favored in Shanks. You want to go first, it's better, but I think we are favored going first or second. I think Shanks needs to see a absolutely perfect curve just to stay in the game. Like, just to have some semblance of staying in the game, they need to draw and play perfectly on curve. That's why I think Purple Luffy is so strong into Shanks, which is presumably the second most played leader in this meta. And it was the second most played leader in Eggman's event. So Shanks, the way we beat Shanks is just to kind of push his face in and go wide and be aggressive to the point where he's unable to play his 10 cost Shanks favorably and live. Which means we are going to get him down to 1 life, hopefully, by his 10 Dawn turn, and he's just will be unable to play 10 costs. He just won't be able to keep up with it. That said, the perfect curve for this deck is straight up, or against this deck is straight up, get the Luffy Taros out, and then you play out the 9 cost Luffy is very strong. Now, because we are trying to, and I alluded to this in the other video I did when I was reviewing the meta, the Philippines CS, which, by the way, if you haven't watched that, if you're a Purple Luffy player, that is a very good video for you. I go over 2 Purple Luffy games. They made 2 very key mistakes I think can make or break games. But if you're playing 9 Mom, do not heal the Shanks unless you're switching over to an alternate win condition where we kind of starve them out and go late. We draw more than they do, and we're able to kind of like basically kill. Like, so whatever 10 cost they play, we're killing the next turn by just swinging large into them. That's kind of the way we play into, you know, Shanks if we are unable to see our perfect curve or whatever. That said, you need to watch out for Lucky Roo. You need to watch out for, you know, Rayleigh, because those are the main, and obviously 7 cost Beckman. Those are the main cards that they're going to be playing to try to remove things. You want to be able to put out cards bigger and, you know, wider than Shanks can. Typically, Shanks doesn't matter to you until after the 7, like until his 7 Dawn turn. Some people are playing Building Snake with the 5 cost Marco, so it sometimes is actually beneficial for you to say, like, play the 7 cost Sanji, rest a Building Snake, and have like your 2 cost Law swing in, or 1 cost Law swing into it just to clear it, you know. Otherwise, it's tough sometimes. If they are able to say, like I said, they need to see perfect cards. Like if they're able to see Building Snake on 1, into or 3, into Marco on 5, into Beckman on 7, into Rayleigh on 9, into 10 cost, that's like their like 1 play line, and that's going first. If they are going second, they'll have to hit like Lucky Roo into Building Snake Marco exactly on that turn, into like Rayleigh, or, you know, Rayleigh Shanks. Like even then that's a little more iffy than the first time. That said, I think we are very, very strong. Play blockers. Once you've established like your 9 cost Luffy, play your blockers out, because it's hard. Shanks has a very hard time removing or dealing with blockers without spending a good amount of Dawn. The most efficient thing he can do is play the Lime Juice, so that doesn't get rid of your blocker, it just makes it unblockable for this, like, you know, for that turn. But that's 3 Dawn in itself. So actually 3 Dawn for that is pretty expensive for Shanks, because that means they're unable to play out like almost anything else that turn. So if you have 2 blockers, you're basically in the clear, unless they like Lime Juice Beckman, but that's a 2k 1k out of hand, so that's also very taxing for them. Marco 5 cost can pop things with 3k or less, so that hits our Namis and hits our Robins, but that's fine, because if he's spending 5 Dawn to do that for that turn, typically if I have a Gungam Giant, he's unable to kill me that turn. And we'll, obviously 8 cost Rayleigh is a lot of Dawn, 7 cost Beckman's a lot of Dawn, but those are ways they can KO us. We are a little bit on a timer here, because if they are able to survive into late game and get like 2 10 cost Shanks on the field, it becomes very hard for us to aggro them down, because the Shanks are able to clear our bodies. We have no way to clear them back. Swinging, like, we're already minus 2k in all our characters, so he gets a lot of value out of playing 2 Shanks. It gets tough, so we lose. So that's all the relevant matchups that I care about. I could, if you want to comment, I could talk about other ones, or you could contact me for coaching. We could talk about other ones. This is my update on the tier list. As of now, I'm testing every single week. The next deck I'm going to test is Shanks extensively, and that's the next guide that's coming out. But as of right now, I still think purple or blue Doffy is by far the best deck in the meta, strictly on matchup spread and consistency. BY Luffy has impressed me a lot. I think the improvements to this deck and the improvements to the playstyle of this deck put it in a position where it, even though, say, purple Luffy is favored into BY, there are ways BY wins. BY, even though Blackbeard is, I would say, favored into BY, there are new tech cards and ways to play where BY wins. It is not, and by the way, BY can beat Shanks, BY can beat Lucci, BY can beat Doffy. So BY is actually set to be in a position because of, one, the skill level of the player, but two, because of the different techs that they're actually starting to employ in the deck. It's in a position where it can actually feasibly kind of go up against anything. It's kind of like Doffy, but just slightly more favored against some decks and slightly less favored against other decks, where Doffy is actually just either even or more favored into basically everything. Purple Luffy, though, I'm very impressed with the deck. I think in a meta where we think, say, Doffy, BY, Blackbeard, and then Lucci, and then Shanks, like, if these are like the main 6 leaders that we see, and Shanks is down here in A. I think Shanks has a lot of work to be done. That's why it's my next deck to test. Maybe I'll move it up and see how I do, like, based off my testing. Maybe I'll move it up or down a tier, or leave it where it's at. But essentially speaking, I think purple Luffy does very well into BY. It does very well into Blackbeard. It does very well into Shanks. I think it is dice roll dependent into both Doffy and Lucci, but it does better into, like, but it can deal with them. The one deck I think purple Luffy doesn't do well into, like extremely bad into, is Bonney, which I think is kind of locked out of the meta, specifically by this guy being probably the most played black leader. A lot of people were leaning towards Blackbeard, but I feel like as more people test and play Lucci, they're finding that they just prefer playing Lucci over Blackbeard. This could change. We have a lot of time, but as of right now, this is the tier list. I don't need to explain everything else, really. But I do think purple Luffy, because of how good it is into a majority of the meta, and because even its losing matchups are, outside of Bonney, are like 45-55 or 40-60, like, at worst, I think we have a shot. I think we have a shot at being, like, honestly, like, one of the best decks in the meta. That said, I will still put it behind Doffy and BY, but I think purple Luffy is going to shock people. I do not want to see what happened at Eggman's tournament again. If we don't see any more topping purple Luffys in this next tournament that's coming up, the Treasure Cup, we're going to have problems. I don't want to have to make another video. Either way, have a good one. Like, subscribe, all that crap.